if you have to speak about 1 MDB and the 2.6 billion, you can actually do this in your sleep, because I mean, it's been like 2-3 years non-stop. Ms. Moderator, my fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it's always amazed me that every time there is a forum, it's always a big crowd. It just shows how Malaysians just love to laugh at politicians. I don't think you come here to really find out new things. You just want to hear how stupid our politicians are. But on the serious, that the public generally was surprised at the extent of the amount of power, the amount of ridicule, and the amount of money that was involved, as if this is a new thing. I mean, those who live long enough would have understood that this is bound to happen. After years and years of serious erosion of independence of public institutions, after years of emasculation of judiciary and agencies, it is bound to happen that when so much power is concentrated in a single man's hands, this kind of things is bound to happen in Malaysia. I kind of understand if the younger generation find it shocking, but I'm sure those who are 40 and above actually feels that it's just a deja vu, it's just a repeat of everything all over again. So let me begin by, I think, answering the question of our forum tonight, the end of rule of law with the question mark, before Gobin actually attempts to answer it. As far as I'm concerned, the rule of law is as good as that a long time ago, you know. It's just that the 1 MDB scandal and the 2.6 billion is just a reminder yet again for yet another generation of how bad things can become if Malaysians don't come together and put a stop to this. Because this is not the first time that you see whatever is happening now. In 1987, the attacks on the judiciary in 87 and 88. And then you have in 1998, and that was my awakening of my generation, to see how everything was manipulated and how the public was taken for a ride just because a prime minister has to get rid of his deputy. And you saw that over the years. So if anything, you know, if anything, the 1 MDB culmination of the last few months, if anything, to me it is a clear sign from God that He is watching, and I think in all His fairness, I think He's trying to tell everyone what goes around comes around. And therefore, I wonder whether Tun Mahathir is watching, or do we have Tan Sri Gani Patail somewhere? For all you know, he's somewhere around there, you know. You know, I wonder, and Tan Sri Muhyiddin watching. I know that Saraf become a hero of sort lately, but I wonder what they feel now, looking back and looking at all those years when they used to have the upper hand, using exactly the same tools and the same tactics at other people. So serve them right, I think. At least, you know. Okay, I mean, I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of the scandal. Every time we have a forum and there's sort of some sort of tag team between myself and Tony Pua over the last few years, he will always concentrate on the very much the nitty-gritty of everything. I usually just make fun of Rosma. So I think he has explained that. I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of that. But what I want to concentrate a bit on the financial aspect of it is how it will affect Malaysia as a country and society for many, many, many years after this. Because 1MDB, even if we manage to put a lid to it, even if Najib's promise that rationalization of 1MDB debts will basically cover and put it as a thing of the past, the financial impact and the financial repercussion of 1MDB will drag into many, many years in the future. But I'm sure, a lot of people, most Malaysians basically know the gist of 1MDB, one way or another. How money was taken supposedly for investments. We never see the investments. And then all the jokes about whether it was money and units and so on. I think anyone understands it now. And so far, the attempts by Najib or UMNO to explain it has really backfired. Each time they try to explain it differently, it will just spin a new set of jokes. And that's why I think if there was one silver lining in all of this, I think UMNO, because of the failure to explain 1MDB nicely and coherently to the public, UMNO themselves had to change their own spin master. And I think that was a big blessing, because now we don't have Datuk Ahmad Maslan anymore as the spin master. We have Anwar Musa now. And that's because I think partly that's the unintended effects of 1MDB. I want to share slightly before I go into the detail of the financial impact. I want to share the other impact, how 1MDB has made Malaysia so recognizable and so popular or unpopular, depending which side you are, overseas and anywhere in the world. I was actually in the UK in the last 2-3 weeks. I had a lot of sessions with students, and then I had a lot of meetings with MPs, and I caught up with some of my old colleagues when I used to work in London. Usually in the past, every time we catch up, the conversation about Malaysia is always about food, nasi lemak and stuff. It's about beaches, where to go, and slightly about weather and so on. This time around, it was very different. Conversation about Malaysia is the excitement about what will happen next with your Prime Minister, because to them, this is like a soap opera. You can never expect what happens next, and it is, I think, the funniest soap opera to them. So it gives me the impression, it's like, I feel like, in a much the same way we look at British, and Mr. Bean reminds us of everything that is funny about British. I think now British, the whole world looks at Malaysia, and Najib kind of have become our Mr. Bean. That explains, everything that is wrong in this country. And someone makes a remark, my friend in London actually made a remark and say that if there is any consolation to Najib, depending on how this whole soap opera will end, if there is any consolation, whatever happens to him, he can be sure of that, this story, his story about 1MDB, about the 2.6, about how it's the kind of story that will make a big Hollywood box office. So he can write the script and give it to Jolo and his son to produce as the next Hollywood movies. He can retire financially comfortable with that. I mean, that's the kind of jokes that we are subjected to when you travel overseas. So if you go overseas, don't claim that you are from Malaysia. I can always say that I'm from Thai, actually. Okay, now let's go back to the financial impact at the macro level beyond what Tony has explained. As much as I say, we are no longer surprised by the magnitude of everything. I suppose 2 or 3 years back, 42 billion ringgit was a lot of money. People were surprised. Now I think everyone sort of have accepted that we have lost 42 billion ringgit. Najib, I'm sure, is a bit glad because the public has come to terms that it's a 42 billion ringgit. But what I'm most concerned, and this is where we should play our role, we should not stop explaining the magnitude of impact to future generations of that 42 billion of ringgit, because the price that we pay for that will definitely go beyond our lifetime. I see quite a lot of you who are much older than us. You should be glad because it's not your problem after this. I mean, Tony is, I think it might actually, he might expire first as well. But you know, the young ones, good luck to you, because a lot of this 42 billion and the liability that we inherit to future generation definitely goes beyond 22, 25. Some, I think, will go as far as 30 years. And it's not just about the actual bond or loans or liability that future generations have to inherit. The fact that all this 42 billion has to come at the point when economically we are very weak, that will have again a series of problems to future generation, because at the time when we are supposed to go through a structural reform of our economy, because we are stuck now, you know, for future generation, we should be concentrating on how to upgrade whatever financial resources that we have. We should use it to absorb whatever changes that we need to go through these few years. But we can't, because 42 billion basically just intertwine everything, so much so that it takes the country's ability to go through economic changes. It robs us of that, and because of that, we are stuck. And let me explain how this happens, you know. Because we are coming to a junction, economic junction, when we are running out of fiscal space. You know, 10 years before, the prime ministers before actually have a bit more freedom to play around, because you have the stability of the palm oil bringing revenue to the country, you have the crude oil giving steady revenue, you have the growth of electronic and manufacturing. All those basically provided us the economic buffer for us to experiment, to make changes and so on. So they could commit scandals before. That's why apologies for Najib usually argue that what's the big deal, because previous scandals by Mahathir was bigger in terms of size. Actually, I don't dispute that. That's correct. Of course, if you take whatever had happened during Mahathir's time and you take into account the inflation and so on, of course, the amount of financial mismanagement during Mahathir's reign obviously is more than 42 billion. But there is one big difference. During those years, we had the fiscal space that, you know, we could absorb whatever was lost in Forex game of the 1991. It was estimated about 30 billion was lost because of the Forex game. We had the capacity to absorb that without really affecting our fiscal position and economic growth. We can't anymore. We have come to the point that because we are running out of fiscal space, we come to the point that 42 billion ringgit has begun to affect all the leverage that federal government could have had. We are now denied the ability to finance government at cheap loans. We can't anymore, because 1MDB has brought very negative perspective of Malaysian economy and market. If you issue bonds now, obviously it is at higher rate than what we could have gotten. We can't, for example, experiment, as I say, because the amount of reserve is no longer there. The international market sentiment is against us, and therefore investors are not coming in. And because of that, 1MDB is like the eye of hurricane that really sucks all these problems and bring it together, so much so that you can already feel the effect on normal Malaysians. For the first time, I think, Malaysian government had to respond through new taxation to this kind of problem. I don't think you have seen a new tax introduced for so many years. It is only during Najib's time that, despite all the risks and unpopularity of GST, he had to introduce GST. Because he just had no choice. Because given that we were running out of fiscal space, and that was contributed largely because of the 1MDB scandal and the way they managed 1MDB scandal, the country now has to grapple with the effect of GST at the time when the country and the public are not ready yet for it economically. And that's why, and this is, I think, where we ought to explain it further, that the impact of 1MDB is going to last really long, and it's going to deprive future generation of a vibrant economy, because our failure to reform our economy structurally now, because of the problems with 1MDB, obviously will set Malaysia 10-15 years behind compared to our competitors, Vietnam. Obviously we are far behind Korea and so on. That perspective is very important, because that's precisely what Najib and Rosmah want us to forget. That is exactly the role of Arul Kanda. I wish he's here so that we can have a debate, you know. But that's I think what he's hired for. He's hired to really quickly wrap up everything, put it somewhere, and very quickly Najib is banking on Malaysians' short memory, so that then within 5-6 months we will forget about it. If we are not careful, that's exactly what will happen. Because that has happened over and over again. And I can't blame Najib and Rosmah for feeling that, look, if Mahathir got away with so many things in the last 22 years of his rule, obviously I can get away as well, using exactly the same approach, the same method, because you can't fault them if they think that Malaysians never change. And this has happened over and over and over again. So that's why, you know, I will take it upon myself to make sure that we have to translate the financial impact of 1MDB to younger ones, because they will bear the brunt of this, so that they can understand, regardless of what happens to 1MDB after this, the negative impact is irreversible. We will have to pay the price. It's just a question that if you are older, you pay less price. If you are younger, good luck to you.